So first of all, I want to introduce Kerry Benson, the creative solution lead at Kantar. She leads a team of creative experts there committed to uncovering compelling insights that drive creative ROI. And her real passion, I had a wonderful discussion yesterday with Kerry, and her real passion is about marketing and advertising and what makes creative break through and work hard. So we're very happy to have her. I think she's the perfect person to actually lead this panel discussion. So welcome, Kerry.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Well, I love this discussion because it's really a complete continuation of what Peter and Letha and the team and Joanna have been talking about. But first, let me introduce our panelist. Greg Pharo is here. I'm really excited that Greg is here. He brings a lot of expertise, clearly from his role at Coca-Cola. And, he's covered a lot of ground in his career with forecasting and media and advertising and research and market mix and market testing and econometrics, and he's kind of covered it all. So really excited to have you, Greg. Thank you. And then I think next we have, we have Orlando's next. No, Peter. So I think Peter's also given us a really good insight into his background and the responsibilities he has as he's covering a lot of ground, as covering sales and marketing and being responsible for making sure he's getting that ROI on marketing and making sure that the short term, impact for all of his marketing and the long tail is driving revenue in the right way. So we see Peter's from Samsung. Before he started at Sharp, he's from Samsung and Gen 1 Ventures and Circuit City and Ziff Davis Publishing, a wide range there, Peter. And it's clear that you can see Peter's passion coming through with this passion for finding and delivering creative ways to give back, not only to marketing, but also to his organizations like Journey of Hope and so on. Excellent. All right. And then welcome, Orlando.
Hello.
Orlando's the Chief Innovation Officer at System One and author of 2 books, Lemon, How Advertising Brain Turns Sour, and Look Out. And also, he's clearly got a lot of experience with really interesting research companies like Brain Juicer and Research International and Simon Godfrey Associates. He's an honorary fellow of the IPA, received a lot of different awards, and has a fantastic education, in Oxford. Thank you, Orlando, for joining us. So, I think, well, as we heard in the previous session, MASB is working on an amazing white paper and this measuring the financial impact of creativity and the importance of creativity in the business. We know it's viewed as a critical element in marketing and advertising and contributes to marketing ROI when it's done effectively. But as Joanna mentioned, it's risky, or maybe Latha mentioned, it's risky and it's nuanced. So one of the data points that has come out of the white paper is that 82% of marketers see creativity as the superpower of marketing, but only 28% see it as critical for business. So my question to the panelists is there a loss of confidence in creativity and its role in building great brands? Who would like to take that first?
Shall I start up? I mean, my perspective is that there has been a loss of confidence and that there's been a loss of experience too in a very digital world. And we have teams of marketeers who've grown up in this very digital performance focused world that perhaps haven't been exposed even to the sort of brand building advertising that we used to see a great deal more of. And here are just some quotes of people I've spoken to recently in marketing teams. So here's one: "We're making less and less advertising because we have less confidence in it. The creative was so bad at Christmas, I refused to run it. I put the spend to the bottom line instead. No one on my team cares about making brilliant advertising anymore." And these are probably marketing directors, CMOs in their mid-50s, who, talking to me, have confided in me this sort of loss of experience or loss of confidence. And I think it is partly because the style of advertising that we see a great deal more of now is very different, and looks different, feels different, works differently. works more in the short term and less in creating these lasting and broad effects. So I think there is a loss of confidence, and I think we need to restore that confidence and bring it back, and that's what I'm really all about.
So Orlando, it's hard to disagree with that, but let me just, Kerry, if I could, let's just take a fast walk through the life we live in now.
Yeah.
Back in the days, we had 5 mediums to play with. Today, it's a hyper-changing short product life cycle. The internet is Darwin on speed. It's the fastest unionization of push and pull on the planet. Raise your hand the last time you were on the internet and you can remember an ad. Unless that ad is something that someone spent an enormous amount of money like Geico with massive consistency, frequency, size, color, location, with a message which was the only relevance was saving 15% in 15 minutes and so on and so forth. So part of it is who is looking? The CEOs and the CIOs, they look, and the CFOs and say, I don't see our advertising. I don't see the effectiveness of it. To be frank with you, if you gave me $1 million today, in today's world, with hundreds of thousands of websites, and I'm going to be relevant, I'll be very, very relevant where I run. Television, it doesn't even make sense, Orlando. Channel 2 says, hey, CBS, we get 30 million people, 8 o'clock on a Tuesday night. Channel 3 is 15 stations at ESPN. That's 18 million. Channel 4 has a special, 45 million. Channel 5, Fox, 15 million. Channel 7, oh my God, it's this show. That's 60 million. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Tuesday night, 8 o'clock. Wait a second. There's only 115 million households. And yes, multiple people in the household. It doesn't, the dollars that we spend today in terms of promulgating the power of the creativity and emotional capital, we have to watch out that the failure of creative just isn't because of the creative, but because we can't get anyone's attention, interest, conviction, desire, and close because they're flooded. They're flooded. And oh, by the way, Kerry, everybody's a publisher. So they're trying to publish their own websites, their own blogs, and they're not really looking at the creative the way they used to either. So I agree, Orlando, but the world 25, 30 years ago and how we consumed advertising is so dramatically. With $1 million 40 years ago, I could have owned 70% of America on Channel 2, Channel 4, and Channel 7 on a Tuesday night. Today, take $1 million with great creative, good luck. It's really difficult, but just adding a little value to it.
No, I totally agree. The media landscape has changed enormously. And some of the new media platforms, perhaps we'll get onto this in a little while, they have a very limited attention span in and of themselves, and so that makes the task very difficult to build a brand in some of those contexts. So yes, you're right, but I think that probably puts the onus on us even more to be even more creative. And when you see the styles I trace in my books, a change in advertising style over the last 15, in particular 20 years perhaps, towards a kind of advertising that simply doesn't attract attention. It's not particularly interesting unless you're in the buying window right now or you've already been warmed up to the brand in some way. You just switch off, you turn away. And it's partly because of that style of advertising, and it's the fact that it's become more prevalent, that I think we're having some of the problems. So if we were to lean into creative and do a better job of it, I think we would get a little bit further on with things.
I don't like to spend a lot of time. I don't like to spend a lot of time admiring the problem. Okay, but I would say that a lot of what has happened with creativity, traces its way back. Orlando, you mentioned digital. Okay, the rise of digital has meant a fragmentation of different channels of communication to consumers.
Yeah.
It also, let's be honest, produced a channel or channels of sale, to consumers for many different categories and many different products. And it really led to a rise of performance marketing and performance advertising, which can be very great in many cases, but an over rotation to performance messaging, to performance marketing, if you will, comes at the expense of building great brands and building great relationships between consumers and brands. And that's part of what we face. Unfortunately, there are so many of today's marketers who've been raised to really focus on performance metrics rather than what I'll just call great brand experiences. And that's part of the problem that we face.
Well, Greg, I would agree 1,000%, but I will say that from my vantage point, products make brands, brands don't make products. You can't name, I can't name a company that created a great brand that didn't have a great product. And that those examples, I'm going to get back a little bit to the creativity we talked about, and what you had said, Orlando. I think MASB, I think a great example of a case study is to study the insurance companies. And I mean, all the way down to the last second of creativity and the dollars spent. Geico, as we know, spent a gazillion dollars with a form of creativity that many of us might say, wait a second, that's not very relevant. Well, it was relevant about 15% and so on. But what happened? All the other insurance companies followed their lead. So they didn't, I've been with Liberty Mutual for 40 years, and I started seeing their ads, and I said to myself, when I used to watch the other ads like Farmers and Progressive, I used to say, those silly companies, people want to know. Insurance is a very important subject for your family to protect them, right? So they want to know what you're going to do for them. And those other insurance companies just followed them from a creative standpoint down the same path. One of them's got this silly creature, a llama, I don't know what it is. Another one's got things dropping on people's heads. Another one has got all these comical things going on. And I look at all that and say, we should do a study. So it probably worked for Geico. Did it work for all the other companies on their creative flavor? Because they're doing the same thing. Silly ads, does it work? And if that formula works with silly ads and they're spending X amount of dollars, does it build the brand? Does it build human capital and emotional capital for that particular insurance company? I'd love to see a study looking at all of that.
It certainly has for Geico, hasn't it? It certainly has for Geico. Yeah. And you've got similar companies over here in the UK, comparethemarket.com, which uses, meerkats to advertise it, and it's phenomenally successful. And silly advertising often works. Often it helps to build a brand because it connects with people in a way that they, perhaps aren't expecting or haven't seen before, and that charms them. It charms them through an emotional appeal. It lodges the brand in memory, and it holds their attention. And that's really, those three things are what we talk about when we talk about brand building advertising. And in this performance world, we've moved to a very different style of advertising, as I describe in my books, which is very flat. It is focused on the word on the screen. It's very direct. It's short, sharp cuts. It's often bits of the body or bits of things like the product that's been abstracted. So you just see the hands, just see the mouth. It's very close up. It's very rhythmic. It's very self-conscious. And it's often pointing the finger and staring at you. Now, that is really, there have always been these two schools of advertising. There's been the direct school of advertising, and then there has been the sort of keeping the brand before the public school of advertising. And often you see these swings towards one or the other. The 1950s was very much like the place we're in today. In fact, 1900s, 1910s was a period of scientific advertising too. We've swung back to that kind of advertising following 40 years since the Creative Revolution. And we've got this very direct style of advertising in the ascendant. And what it's done is it's meant that we've lost the knack of this brand building, which seems silly, which looks entertaining, which feels different and works differently, because this direct school of advertising works on only those who are half interested in the product already right now. And it converts them, pushes them towards a sale, nudges them towards a website. It's direct response, essentially. Brand building advertising, of course, as we all know, works over a longer time period. It has lasting effects. It stores in the memory. And it's for all those people who may not be in the market right now, but could be in 3 months, 2 years down the line, at which point the brand will be front and center in the mind. Because there's a search engine here before you get on to Google. So, you've got these two schools of advertising, and we have, because of the digital revolution, started to favor one over the other. And there are all sorts of other reasons for that, which we perhaps go into, but that's what I think has happened, and why we face this, whether we call it a crisis or not, this shift in advertising style that I think needs to be redressed.
Well, I think that's interesting. I think that we've covered a couple of different things I want to pull back. So one is, Peter, you mentioned the insurance category, but you also said brands are made of products, right? It's kind of products make brands, brands don't make products. The insurance category, if you look at why everyone copied Geico, is because the products are commoditized. They're all regulated. It's pretty much the same. There's really not a difference between Liberty Mutual's, auto insurance and Geico's auto insurance. So that each of those brands had a real hard time with trying to get attention and creating brand memories, especially for a product that people don't really like, because you pay for insurance, you don't really need it unless you're in an accident, and then your premiums go up. So there's a little bit of that's one great that's a good category example, but then there's another kind of for brands that have the luxury of having a great product or something that is differentiating and it resonates because of the product itself. That's maybe an easier marketing and advertising challenge than products that have to are more in a commodity based kind of industry. So what role does creativity play when it's really coming down to this challenge of trying to create a brand memory in a very fragmented digital environment today? Like you said, you can't really build that audience anymore with TV. And we know that 75%, most advertisers the average advertiser today is spending 75% of their total media budget in digital, not in TV, and the remaining is in TV and other. So it's kind of a fascinating disruption that we're taking place. We're talking about a number of different themes. I like the theme of advertising changing, and the creative style of advertising is changing. We're touching on some of those drivers, but do we think over time, has it become too mechanical?
Commoditization is a standard bill of fare in literally every single market category you can think of. And the quiz question is, if you're going to sell a towel and I'm going to sell a towel, am I going to just try to sell the towel the same way you do? Or am I going to try to creatively break through? My only point there was none of them have stood up and said why they're different. They've all said, hey, we're funny, and try to remember us.
Yeah.
So whether the funny part is something that is relevant that the others aren't talking about. So, for example, Liberty Mutual came out and said, hey, guess what? We can customize your insurance. Terry, to your point, when I heard that and they kept spending millions of dollars on it, I'm like, but I can customize my insurance with anybody. But that's all they could find in their features and benefits of the products they offer. By the way, they're not only selling us as consumers, they're selling all of their franchisors and dealers who carry lots of different insurance. So that's the only point I would make on that. There still must be a way for them to break out and break through. Because if I said to you, after all of them spent billions of dollars, which one would you choose? You'd scratch your head and you'd probably say, Kerry, what you said, which is they all seem to have the same instruments and features and benefits of their products, but that means that they have not given us the dignity of knowledge to prefer one over the other. One last example, Nike versus Adidas. You go to the store and there is a Nike t-shirt. It's peanut cotton from Vietnam. It's $19.99 with that swoop. Here's Adidas. I checked the material. It's exactly the same material. Exactly. It's peanut cotton from Vietnam. In fact, it's the same address, the same factory. But Adidas is $12.99. Why do I choose the Nike? Greg, you want to like this one. The reason? Because I think psychologically, emotionally, the emotional capital says, if I wear the Nike t-shirt, I'll play basketball better. That's it. So that's really the question, encapsulating the value proposition of the creative. How do you get to the back of the brain? How do you build emotional capital? And they have a great hook to do it. Apple did it on products. Products is what built the Apple brand, not the brand building the products. But how do you look at that Nike model and say, my God, everyone wants to wear Nike sneakers and t-shirts because way back in their brain, they're going to play basketball better, run better, and look cooler. And Orlando, you're right. Right now, it's very flat. I look at advertising very, very flat. And I'll come up for air.
Yeah. Sorry, Greg, please.
One of the key things to be able to keep in mind is that there are many, many different ways of being able to interact with audiences, to interact with consumers. It doesn't just have to come through advertising.
Right.
There's other ways we can communicate our products, our brands, okay? At Coca-Cola, not only have we been shifting a fair amount of our marketing investment into digital channels, but very importantly, we've been focusing quite a bit on experiences. And that can include experiential marketing in all of its different forms. What do I mean by that? It could be integrating products and brands into a in-game experience for gamers. It can be through way of sponsorships. It can be in the form of pop-up retail locations. The point is that there are many different ways of being able to touch audiences, to get them actually to participate with you and your products and your brands, not just through interruptive style advertising. Don't get me wrong, traditional advertising has a place. I would even argue that television still has a place, maybe not nearly as dominant as it used to be. But we as marketers need to be able to think a little bit outside of the box about how we can participate with people outside of traditional advertising.
Funny enough, Greg, as you were talking, I was just thinking, if you look back to some of the principles of Bill Bernbach in the 1960s, they apply not just to advertising, but I think they probably apply to all kinds of brand experience as well. So, for instance, he might have said, find the magic in your product or find the drama in your product. Understand the deeper human motivation. He would have said, be honest, respectful of your audience and their intelligence. He would have said, project a personality. He would have said, respect the whole experience, or the vibration you get from your marketing, before you sort of actually look at it and read it. And he would have said, only feeling makes you act. And feeling is a hugely important part of any marketing endeavor, really. And I think those are some of they're quite useful principles for us to think about, even today. And, actually these creative principles don't change very much. Cicero was probably saying something similar 2,000 years ago. These things don't change. Media changes, and the way our means of communication with people, but actually some of these principles, they're human and they're lasting.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Orlando's real classic, and certain truths that apply to advertising and creativity in general. Joanna, I see you have a hand up. You want to ask a question?
Yes, it's really, I just wanted to kind of add to what Peter was saying about products. Now, we get it 1,000%, right? And we wholeheartedly agree on the importance of product, as I think the team has already said. But the difference is that companies understand more easily the need to invest in product than the need to invest in creativity in the marketing sense. So this is why, and from the point of view of measuring, figuring out how to measure the financial impact of creativity, it specifically has to focus on marketing creativity, because as you saw by the definitions, creativity is a big word. That's why we had to start out by defining it and cutting it down. So we completely agree, and we will make sure to include that, in the discussions of the team. But I just wanted to say that from our point of view, that's the major difference, is people do not understand the need to invest in marketing creativity.
My only point is that there is no marketing and advertising without a product or service or a Coca-Cola to drink. So in the end of the game, because again, I run the P&L, I'm worried about returns. I'm worried about the long term of the consumer, the long-term aspects of the retailer who says your product's not spinning. I'm going to cancel you on your 6-week lock of the next supply that we were going to bring in. So I have to worry about all of that. So the creative impact, I could spend $50 billion right now. And I'll bet you I could get people, let's do a post test on people. Did they remember the ad? Did they like the creative and so on? Yeah. But if the product is not as creative and it's not as sexy and is not as warranted and doesn't fit into what either, Greg, what you said, which is the lifestyle part of it, as opposed to he's slamming over the head, look, I got 50 billion, now you're going to watch this ad, versus people are drawn to Coca-Cola, people are drawn to Nike. All of that, I believe, has to be brought into consideration. So it's not a solitude of just the actual creative, but it is the more ambient view and a chord that builds between the funnel of the product, the services, the aspects, telling your friends about that product, boom, 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 which builds the power of the brand. And then that means that the creative that you spent time to create and the ad money gets triply amplified. I was reading Kantar and Wark's recent research regarding 4 times to 8 times more profitability terms. Increases in productivity deliver increases in profitability. So the more productive the product is, the more productive the consumer is in telling other people about your products through an experience at Coke or through the actual usage of a product, or I called your 1-800 number. That will give me more spins and profitability, which keeps the P&L well, which then we can spend more money on advertising creativity. So it's hard for me to separate them and polarize them. That's why I bring them together. But forgive me, everybody, it's because I'm running both the sales side and the brand and advertising side. I'm traveling to see all these retailers every day, getting products on the shelf, fighting competitors. So it's a little bit of a different view. And I adamantly agree with everything you're all saying, and I'm learning. Thank you for the dignity of knowledge. It's very interesting.
Peter, one of the things that Bill Bernbach said was, that if you've got a poor product, then great advertising is going to make you fail faster. So, a product's totally necessary to have a great product, and I totally agree with you there. One of the things that great advertising can do, and I'm talking specifically about the kind of brand building advertising that stirs the emotions, and perhaps we could go in talking a bit about what that looks like, is that it gives you pricing power. It means that you can charge your $19.99 rather than your $12.99 for your t-shirt, for your identical t-shirt. And we overlook that. We think about sales, growing market share, some of those things, but actually great brand building advertising means that you can charge more for your product. You can hold your prices, you can put them up and expect less of a drop, as a result, particularly in inflationary times as we've been through. So I think that's something that we need to think about. And I think the reason is because it connects emotionally. But also, you mentioned the Geico. When you've got what I call a fluent device, a repeatedly used character, a repeatedly used scenario, like Snickers, you're not you when you're hungry, that is instantly recognizable, it creates a kind of processing fluency in people. So they just think of it like that. They go straight to it. It's top of mind. And that's the one that they think of first. And that, everything else is sort of sidelined. And that's really that fluency that goes with familiarity, fluency, fame, feeling. All of these things go together. All of those F's go together, and that's what brand building advertising helps you to do, I think.
I just want to refer back to Joanna and Kerry about something that our tagline for Sharp Home Appliances, Greg, that's the division that I'm in. It's TVs, it's built-in kitchen appliances. We are the leader in built-in microwave drawer. I built a tagline internally 4 or 5 years ago, and it says, and it's part of our mantle or moniker, Sharp, simply better living. Simply better living. Whether you like it or not, that's what we did. It's all over our packaging, everything we do. We all seem to like it. But the point is this: when we look at the product disciplines we're about to build, if the product's not really, really simple to use, if it's not better than the competition, what do I define it as? PVC, price over value, has to beat the competition. Price over value has to beat the competition. To your point, Orlando, about the price, you should get a few more pennies for your brand is really the goal, says the CFO and the CEO. And then living. It's all about living, whether it's about air purification, whether it's about a better living style in the center of your home, the kitchen, or watching a television, a Sharp Aquas TV, where you feel like you're the pirate in the Penzance as you're watching it in a room. You feel like you're swinging through. So if the products that we bring to market are not simple, that's simply better living, and our service is not simply better living, and our supply chain is not simply better living, and the actual articulation of the creative, again, whatever medium, whatever place, is not simple and better than my competition and all about a better living lifestyle, then I blew it. And so Toys R Us comes to mind. Toys R Us, my God, who wouldn't love to own Toys R Us? Greg would be going, he's vibrant. Oh, I'd love to own it. But the problem was they didn't stick to their mantle. You'd go into a Toys R Us, and where was the excitement? Where was the energy? The associates themselves are a form of creativity. If they're not feeling like they're playing with kids coming in and parents and making them feel like, wow, this is a great place to be. To your point, Greg, that is a point of creativity. So again, I think the mission and the strategy has to be, who are you? Who do you want to become? And why do you matter? And how do you differentiate yourself from your competition? But again, in supply chain, in branding, in advertising, in marketing, in the product itself, that to me is where the measurement has to be. The cynosure of the discussion, parabolic curves need to be on what's under the ribs of the brand and the brand promise across all those touch points, because it's just costs too much to just think about we're going to spend advertising money. Advertising is all throughout every touch point you have. Thank you very much. I feel better. Kerry, I'm sorry. I get excited about these things.
It's okay. Jim, you've had your hand up for a bit. Do you want to ask a question now?
Yeah. Thanks, Kerry. Yeah, my question is to Greg from reading your brief background. I think your current responsibilities and mine going back to when I was at Miller Coors, also in the beverage industry, slightly different result from drinking the two, but as I sit here drinking my Diet Coke, thank you. But I'm going to get into the notion of communicating creativity to the C-suite. My specific question is, you can choose the good, the bad, or the ugly here. What have you seen done well or not so well in terms of marketers trying to communicate the benefits of creativity to the C-suite?
It's a great question. I think that there's a few different facets for that. Okay, I'll start probably at the end, and that is that it becomes really, really necessary to be able to connect the dots to the bottom line. Okay, at some point in time, you have to be able to show that that better creativity is going to yield desired business results. Okay, and yes, that can be a little bit tricky because, as we discussed, much of the benefits of creativity in advertising can have not just a short-term effect, but an even bigger effect over a longer period of time. So a few of the things to keep in mind there is, first off, be sure that C-suite is comfortable and understands this mental model of differences between short-term performance and long-term performance, that they buy into this notion of brand equity and how you build brand equity. Then you need to be able to have measurements in place, both for being able to measure short-term performance and how creativity factors into that, as well as how creativity and metrics that you use to measure creativity impact brand building over a longer period of time. And that gets into a few different disciplines. You have to be able to have, first off, the constructs in place, know what you're trying to measure, have those metrics in place. By the way, those metrics might exist at different points in the end-to-end process you use to first create and then to optimize and then deliver your messages. It's not just about copy testing, okay? Although that can be a very important point of, that can be one important point in the end-to-end process. You need to be able to have the analytics in place to then take the metrics, take the data, and then render that as insights on what sort of lift you're getting. And how much of that lift is ultimately coming from media-related factors versus what's coming from creative factors. Also, a very important point of differentiation is that message matters. So you need to be able to understand the difference between what you're getting because you have a great message versus the creative elements that you use to communicate and articulate that message. So those are some of the ways that I would frame it up as far as how you need to be able to think about the issue and then be able to communicate it to the C-suite. A C-suite, of course, will tend to want to get some sort of discipline in place for being able to report on creative metrics. But this is where you have to be a little bit careful. Okay, we've had protocols in place at Coca-Cola for a very, very long time on how to measure and how to gain insights from creativity. And while looking at performance of creativity, looking at the metrics involved there are important, you also have to be able to have some freedom within the framework so that you're not just slave to delivering on the numbers. Rather, you use those metrics as a way of advisement rather than a form of punishment for people. If all you do are focus on hitting the numbers, then you're missing out valuable information that you get, very valuable information from consumer research by listening to consumers, talking to audiences. And I would say that that's where a key balance is don't try to make this into a completely a numbers-driven exercise. It really, first and foremost, one of the key things that you want to make sure that your C-suite understands is that it's a process of enlightenment. It's a process of educating ourselves. It's a process of listening to consumers rather than just one of mere measurement.
Yeah, that's well articulated. A quick follow-up here, and by the way, you can pass on this one because it's kind of a tricky one, but can you, in your recent experience, can you think of, this was just a home run message where a marketer interacted with the C-suite. It's like, whoa, that was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of some specific examples. Okay, I'd probably, just for the, for the sake of privacy, probably don't want to get into all of those examples. But yes, we have those type of experiences on a very regular basis at Coca-Cola, where there is good and there is bad, okay? And then there's also experiences that we just learn a lot from, okay? And we say, wait a second, we think that we realize we should have done something differently, okay? And so it's, if you have the right, if you've got the right tools, the right processes, the right people in place, you're going to be having those discussions all the time.
That was great, Greg. A really good overview. Thank you, because you really covered on a lot of the things about measuring creativity, how to sell it in to senior management. I think it is important to get their buy-in into brand equity, and that kind of goes back to what the white paper has uncovered, which is brand equity and how to measure that. And in the session before ours, we talked about emotional connection. So that kind of brings me back to this idea of how does creativity earn mental availability? Because it's really, whether you're talking about a brand or a product or an emotional message or a rational message, it's really about mental availability. You're trying to earn mental availability in a consumer's mind. And so how much do you need to earn? And what is how does creativity play in creating mental availability, which in turn turns into a brand memory, which it then turns into some type of action, whether it's in the short term or the long term?
Yeah. Perhaps I could say a couple of words about that, because it's something I've looked at quite a lot, and I looked at the sort of features of advertising that capture what you might describe as our broad beam, vigilant, alert kind of attention. And it tends to be, when we're talking about audiovisual advertising that involves the living, where there is perhaps some intention. Intention actually holds our attention, funnily enough, where there is some sort of psychological transformation that you can see through the face and body. So emotion expressed through the face, the body, and the voice, where there is a scene unfolding in front of you. So rather than short, sharp cuts of static objects, where there is something living, and when there is a sense of betweenness, so people connecting between each other, either through dialogue or the way that they look at each other, something for the audience to fill in the gaps and understand this social context and what is going on here. That's the sort of advertising that both captures and holds attention, but also elicits an emotional response. And when you look at those, at the features I've been describing for performance advertising, which tends to be very flat, mechanical, words on the screen, against the sort of advertising I've just described, with the living, a scene unfolding, something happening, connection between people. If you overlay that on the campaigns that have been submitted for the IPA's Effectiveness Awards, which I have done with Peter Field, what you find is that more mechanistic advertising, so words on the screen, short, sharp cuts, that is more likely to drive these direct response effects, because it's sort of telling people who are already primed towards the brand to like the brand or in the buying window, reminding you it's there, we're here, buy us. But the scene unfolding, people, the living, something extraordinary emerging from the scene, something unusual, that kind of advertising, that's much more likely to capture your attention, elicit that response, and create business effects like profit gain, share gain, and sales gain, really big, broad, lasting business effects, because it lodges into memory better, because it captures our attention and lodges into memory better. And there are good reasons for this. If you look at the brain and these two types of attention, broad and narrow, and in fact, those two types of attention, broad and narrow, reflect the two schools of advertising that have always existed: the brand building advertising, and then this sort of performance direct response type advertising that also exists, that assumes half an interest already in your brand and product.
I would just add to that, which is difficult to add, Orlando, that's really well said.
Thank you, Peter.
Is that as part of all this too, is that I don't hear us talking about the data tools that we have. So, for example, in my book, Green Rain Leadership, we talk about the difference between CRM, SCRM, and how it's been articulated by the IT department, which is CRM, Customer Relationship Management. I renamed it to Consumers Really Matter. And if consumers really matter, the data lakes and the data that we gather on them is just so critically important, because, if I know Greg really loves outside of work, he rides horses and he's enjoying horses, then I'm going to make sure that my creativity is as relevant to him as I can, down to one-to-one marketing. I know we're talking about broader advertising, but as Greg said earlier, there's all kinds of ways to articulate and have a relationship. as an example, Orlando, I don't know if it's like this over there on your side of the world, but I've had three banks my entire life. One of them is 1 mile from my home. I've purchased, I don't know how many cars that I had to take a loan out of. I've put my children through college. I had to take loans out. I had loans on multiple homes over time, blah, 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 blah. They're 1 mile away and they don't know me. I've been with them for 30 years. And so when I tell them that, they're like, what do you mean? We know you, Mr. Weedfald. You're this and that. No, no, no. The emails that you send me are so general. You don't seem to know about me and my family. And all the billions and trillions of dollars spent on building formidable CRM systems where you're collecting that data. Yet, isn't that the core of what you want to do to have a long tail of your brand and your products in terms of your creative execution? Don't you want to talk to them that way? Don't you talk to your wife differently than you talk to your doctor? And so part of that for us is, how do you take return on investment and utilize all the data tools, all the information that's going back and forth so rapidly your head would spin? And I think that's a very important part of building the best creative you can to get the best stimulation, emotional capital, etc. So Greg, for you, there's a trillion. Right now, I'm going to use a trillion, probably wrong, probably very light, so I apologize. A trillion instances of a Coca-Cola bottle or a Coca-Cola logo globally. Okay. So I have a certain relationship with Coca-Cola and I see it all the time. The consistency and frequency is unbelievable, but they're selling just one, really not one, a whole bunch of products that are liquid products. But my respect for them is very relevant. And when I see messaging from them, it's a very highly relevant message that hits home to me and my family. I don't see a lot of that going on. I see a lot of general. One last example in retail. Let's say I spent $50,000 last year at Macy's. And Orlando, you spent $10. Why do I get the same offer? Oh, look, jewelry's 10% off for both of us. No, no, no. I've spent $50,000. You should give me a special deal that's different. And so I don't think we do enough one-to-one corresponding relevant marketing with the creative executions we're doing. So I'll come up for air. I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Okay, so thank you, Peter. I think it's very interesting. We've covered a lot of ground. And I'd like to open it up for questions. So we have a few questions. If Frank, you want to take over moderating the questions, that would be great.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we have a hand raised from Venki. So Venki Shankar, you should be able to open your mic now.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Great discussion, all the panelists. Thank you. I have two questions. One is, the broadening of creativity to beyond messaging. For example, one way of thinking creativity is thinking differently about a lot of things. Peter did talk about creativity extends everywhere in your store, in your product design, everything. But, also, if you think about the success of Red Bulls, their creativity was to think about marketing Red Bull through, being a drink for people who are in space, F1 formula, right? So they're thinking not through the message, but how do we actually disrupt? So one of the ways to think about creativity is how do we disrupt the flow? Because when you disrupt the flow, a lot of you talked about attention grabbing and all those things, silly ads of insurance, and I've done quite a bit of work in that space. Those are all to try and see, how do I stand out and grab your attention? And after that, I think that the job becomes how to engage, right? Creativity doesn't stop at communicating something, doesn't stop at grabbing attention, to engage that so much. So I think you all did a great job of talking about the difference between brand building and performance. Nowadays, we're talking about, directly addressing and getting an immediate return, which can be measuring creativity that way. We're talking about personalized advertising, even that is simpler. But that brings the issue of, AI, trying to really, generative AI. Now you can not only write copies, but now it's, Sora, which is the latest, multimodal offering from OpenAI. You can create your own visuals. You can create your own commercials. You can create all of these. So I wanted your views on, is creativity now going to become more mechanistic? That is, AI can do it. So that what do we literally call as creative, right? Really, and how do we measure that impact of that? In my own research, I'm working on these digital artworks. So I'm looking at NFT of this is AI created digital artworks versus human created digital artworks. And what I'm finding is that, we talked about the branding power of brands is that you get a premium. We're finding in our results that people are still wanting to pay more for human created artwork, digital artwork, than AI created, right? So that means there is something about the human creativity that is different from the machines or artificially induced creativity. Can you speak to that issue of where we going here with this? If you're going with this measurement, with trying to benchmark all these things, are we missing something by not addressing this elephant in the room, which is many of these creatives are going to be machine generated in the future?
Venki, thank you so much for your question. I think, the future is already here and that there is a huge amount of work that is being done through generative AI. What I would say is that at the end of the day, generative AI is a tool, okay? And those particular companies that I'm familiar with that are most successful are using generative AI in conjunction with human-based decision-making and creativity, okay? The two of them really pair up together, like peanut butter and jelly, if you do it right, okay? To your point, there is always a risk that AI can lead, if done the wrong way, if people are sloppy about it, if they're lazy about it, can potentially lead to inferior creative expression, okay? Just set it and forget it mentality is not going to produce a winning set of a winning campaign. If, on the other hand, you use it in the right way. For instance, I think that there's an academic study which I had seen, which showed that when you have a generative AI that then produces an image that is in the style of a particular artist, okay, and that is going to be relevant to the message and the audience, then it's far, far more effective. So in other words, just don't prompt for, a forest scene in wintertime with a deer, but prompt for a specific artist that has his own creative style there, okay, which is going to really resonate with your brand imagery, with what your brand stands for. So I think that these are some of the issues that we have to think through, and that is how to make sure that we're able to keep true to our brands and keep true to the type of message that we're trying to deliver, even as we use the wonders and the magic of generative AI. One thing I would encourage people to take a look at, and this might be a little bit of shameless plugging, but we have a wonderful video creative from Coca-Cola, okay, masterpiece. And I would just encourage you, if you get a chance, to look at that. And I think that shows, a very nice marriage of generative AI along with, a very true, very authentic representation of our brand.
So it's a lovely spot, isn't it? And I'd sort of think of AI as assisted intelligence, really, because it can't replace someone's experience of living in the world and grounded in the world. It is procedural in a sense. It is a procedural kind of intelligence that is able to do things at speed and quantity, and perhaps to speed things up to assist the creative in their role. And sometimes, the slight danger is the easier it gets to create something, the less interesting it becomes. And I think that is, we've seen a bit of that in the last 15 years. It's much easier now to create a certain kind of ad, an ad with those short, sharp cuts with the words on the screen, and it's cheaper as well to create that kind of ad than the sort of brand building ad I was describing as well. So I think there's a role for it, but I would see it as an assistant rather than a replacement.
But I would take the other side. I think as a consumer, my dream is to have AI affect the way you articulate to me. In essence, if you're gathering all this data about me in a data lake, and if you really understand who your audience is, I mean, advertising and marketing goes back to it's a unique editorial franchise and position which attracts a certain group of people who have the will, the need, and the means, whether it's Coca-Cola, whether it's any product. And then we get to come in with our advertising and marketing to address that group. So I think as a consumer, we're hoping, and hope is not a strategy, that AI will be able to articulate to us and navigate our needs, our desires, our wants, because you're going to use that platform to deliver what's most interesting and relevant to me. Meaning, and we saw this years ago, Greg, remember all of a sudden there was this big drive that we're going to run this ad on Sound and Vision, and we're going to run this ad on USA Today, and we're going to run this ad on retail. It's the same product, but a different voice for each of them. I think that's what we're looking for as consumers. Go ahead. If I'm thinking about buying horse saddles, then certainly AI should know that, and AI should feed me the creative that's relevant to me being around horses, and not an ad that's relevant to me buying perfume. So AI has a lot of opportunity on the other side to reach the consumers, to build their trust and build relevancy in the brand and the products, and best articulate the communications or the message of the creativity.
Well, Peter, that's
Well
a really
said.
great point. Okay, in that there's a lot of craze right now around generative AI. But the truth is, before there was ever generative AI, there was AI for prediction and analytics. And that's what you're really addressing, okay? Is let's make sure that we're breathing with both lungs, that we're using that predictive analytical AI in order to deliver better experiences for consumers. And that's going to involve several things. It will involve, making sure that we know who people are, okay, so that we're able to speak to them in a more authentic way, okay, a more personalized way. It also means that we're able to use predictive AI to be able to do some smart experimentation and testing and learning, okay, to find out what works and what doesn't work in terms of how we deliver messages, how we develop creativity, okay, so that it's not just loading up your big generative AI cannon and fire away, but we have the right type of experimentation and test and learn approaches to really get smart about how we do it.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. It's been a great discussion. I'm glad we started to hit on generative AI and AI in general, because there's more to come on that subject matter later on today. But thank you very much for your all of your insights and your knowledge and sharing your points of view. It's been a great discussion.
Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Orlando. Thanks, Kerry. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Peter. Great.
Thanks for the great panel discussion.